Morning, everyone. Jose, what was wrong? You sound sad. Is it because it's the last day? You're having too much fun. You don't want it to end, do you?
Yeah, but we're being a pain in the ass for the conference. We need to stop. We need to stop.
You're not making any friends at the hotel, right?
Yeah, but there are other conferences in Europe and they're having a hard time.
Well, I want to say thanks for having me here for my first time. And I have to say, I've had a fantastic time. I've had some great conversations with people, and I'm a little sad it's the last day because I didn't want it to end. I mean, how many places you go and you have carnival dancers and you have so many cars being built in the lobby? You don't get there, do you? And this is cool. Yeah. I'm still having nightmares about that. But anyway, it has been a fantastic conference, and I want to take this opportunity to thank Jose and Madeline and Uwe for putting on such an amazing few days. Well done. Thank you. You know, what I liked about this conference is that everyone is so friendly. So many people have said that to me. Oh, everyone's so friendly. You can go up and talk to anybody. You can, just say hello, introduce yourself, ask what they do, have a nice, interesting conversation about their talk. You can walk up to somebody and say, oh, hi, I'm Antony.
Hi.
You are?
I'm a speaker here.
Yes, what was your name?
Anahi.
Okay, and what do you do?
I'm a QA automation engineer.
Sorry, say that again.
I'm a QA automation engineer.
A QA automation engineer, and I could walk up to this guy here. Hello, I'm Antony.
I'm Jan.
You are?
Jan.
And what do you do?
So I'm a software engineer with a focus on testing.
A software engineer. So you can walk up to anyone and say, hey, what do you do? What's interesting about most people's answer is, what do you do? I am a. Not what you do. You've just told me your identity. It's interesting, isn't it? What do? I am a something. Suddenly, you've put yourself in a box. And now I'm making all sorts of assumptions about what it is that you do as a QA engineer or as a software engineer. And I've got this idea in my head of the boundaries of your work. And I think that's limiting to us. I think it actually holds us back a lot of the time. And I think it limits the agility that we can achieve in our teams. So that's what I really want to talk to you today about. And a little bit about my personal journey through a number of experiences and a number of stories that I think shaped how I think about this and how I love that ringtone. So, we've asked you what do you do, and you've told me the thing that you are, your identity. And I think that's quite important for a lot of people. There was a talk, one of the track talks at the beginning of the week, where one of the questions was asked, and the person said, actually, this is my identity. I'm very proud to be a tester. I want to tell people that that's what I am. And I said, that's great, okay, that's fine. And I think we all want to have a sense of identity. It's a part of our sort of our pride in ourselves, isn't it? In fact, many jobs and salaries are based on how wonderful your job title sounds. The more large-sounding and important-sounding your job title, the bigger the salary. So why wouldn't we be encouraged to create a job title for ourselves? Whether it's tester, QA engineer, software engineer, Grand Wizard Jedi Software Guru. I mean, whatever the title happens to be, the bigger it gets, the bigger salary it gets, right? But I think it creates a shorthand or a shortcut to establishing some expectations from each other within our teams. So you tell me you're a tester, I'm expecting you to do the testing. You tell me you're a software engineer, I'm usually expecting you to write code. We make assumptions, but what if what you can do for the team goes beyond the boundaries I set for your job title? What do we do then? And I think it's really strange how at work we create this constraint. We limit ourselves. Now, personally, when I'm in a team, if I'm honest, I just don't want a title. I don't really want to be the special one in the team. I just want to be a part of a group, a community that share in a single responsibility. If a title is too specific, I feel limited. But then if it's too vague, people get frustrated. So what do you do, Anthony? Well, I kind of do stuff in software like, and I'm like, yeah, but like what? People they want a short, fast answer, even if it simplifies or reduces it down to something that's too low a resolution to really give you a flavor of who I am and what I do. And I'm many things. I am a tester. I am a developer. I'm many things. If I ask you all that question, in fact, I've asked many people this question over the last few days, and the majority of people I've spoken to here, which is very refreshing, would actually answer yes to several of those questions. Are you a developer? Yes. Are you a tester? Yes. Are you a business analyst? Yeah. I'm not only one thing, I'm many things. And as I mentioned, I have a son who's in kart racing. I won't bore you about that because once I get started, that's it. This whole talk's going to be about motorsport and Formula One, and I won't bore you to death with that. But I do spend a lot of time thinking about parenting because I think it's the most important job that I have. And I kind of have thought about parenting over the past, 30, 40 years. You look at some statistics from the 1960s about how families spent their time. Mum had a very, very clear role in the family. She would take care of the housework and managing the home and looking after the kids, and Dad would go out to work and maybe do a little bit of housework and spend some time with the kids. In 1965, in the US, actually, a survey was done, and there was a very clear, very strong separation of the responsibilities between the title of mum and the title of dad. Mums, on average, spent 8 hours doing paid work per week. Obviously, many were doing no hours paid work, and men were doing something like 42. Mums were looking after the home and spending up to 32 hours a week doing that in 1965, and dads were doing about 4. I don't think that's changed much, actually. Not in my house, anyway. I've outsourced that problem to a cleaner, so... But interestingly, childcare, in 1965, with stay-at-home mums in the United States, they only got to spend 10 hours a week of focused childcare because you're so busy doing all these other things. It's not focused on quality time with your kids. Dads spent an average of 2.5 hours a week with their kids. I can't imagine spending so little time with my son. But that's how it was. But times have changed. The role of mum and dad isn't quite so clearly separated. Suddenly families are parents and their children. So today, the amount of time spent in paid work between mums and dads is much, much closer. For mums it's in the 20s, for dads it's in the 30s. So dads are actually working fewer paid hours now. Dads are spending more time contributing to looking after the home, and mums are spending less time looking after it. But still a lot more than dads, sorry. But in childcare, interestingly, the amount of time we spend with our kids has only gone up by 14 hours, but with dads, dramatically gone up by 7 hours. So what we've seen between the 1960s and the current era that we're in is that the roles that were very, very specific, that had very, very specific responsibilities, have now become much more dynamic. Parents are being quite adaptive, bringing whatever skills and whatever capabilities they have to the betterment of the household. Sometimes I visit some companies, and I'm sure it's not like this for any of you, but sometimes I feel like some of those companies are still stuck in the 1960s, along with some of those parents. When you look at sort of these very long, drawn-out processes for getting funding, and then requirements, analysis, and design, and all of this long, drawn-out, waterfall-based life cycles, a surprising number of companies still do it. Is anyone here from a company that's predominantly waterfall? A few. That's interesting. It was good that you're here. Thanks. Yeah, so I still see this a little bit. So I think we look back at the 1960s and families, so roles that were very specific have become much more adaptive and much more dynamic. I think we're seeing that a lot in the workplace also. Now, my first XP experience as Jose mentioned, before people were using the term Agile, my first XP project was officially in the year 2000. I stumbled onto this contract opportunity. I took it, and they said, yeah, we're using this new methodology called extreme programming. I was like, okay, that sounds cool, you know, the usual imagery of sort of diving off a cliff, base jumping with a keyboard and all that stuff. Obviously, that was the first thing that came to my mind, just like with many people. And when I got there, and actually I thought, yeah, it's extreme, but actually it makes an extreme amount of sense, you know. It made complete sense to me. But unofficially, my first XP project was quite a few years before that. It's just that I didn't know it. So when I was very young, my dad bought a computer. And, you know, we'd spend a lot of time with each other, go and play tennis. As a family, we'd all go play tennis. And then a certain sort of change in my family occurred, and my mum left. And it was just me and my dad. Excuse me if I get a little bit emotional. It was just me and my dad. And he was working so hard, I hardly got to see him again anymore. We were always spending so much time together. And one of the reasons was he was trying to run a business, but he'd lost so much money after the divorce that he really, really had to work really hard to try and just bring in enough money just to keep us going. And he would come home in the evenings, and the economy was getting worse. So he'd come home in the evenings, and he'd be in the office upstairs. He'd be doing all of these estimates for new work. He was a steel fabricator, so he built things pretty much out of steel. All of that stuff, or any metal. So all of the rigging up there, that's the kind of thing that he would build. Or decorative railings, or even cabs for cranes, or even structural steel, or even the windows, say, in the Broadgate Centre in Liverpool Street. Things like that. And he'd spend hours and hours and hours at home in the evening, and I just wouldn't get to see him. Now, meanwhile, I'd been sort of like hacking away on code, copying code out of magazines to kind of build little games on my Commodore 64. And I just thought, maybe we can make this easier for him. Maybe we can. And we talked about it. I said, Dad, look, there must be some way. Let's find some time. Let's sit down, and we'll just work this out. And we'll try and save you some of that time in the evening so we can spend some quality time. So there we were, sitting at the computer. Our equivalent of Google was a stack of magazines, because there was no internet, obviously. You know, a stack of magazines were a flick through for code examples. And we'd sit there, and I'd say we passed the keyboard backward and forward, but if you know what a Commodore 64 is, you're actually passing the whole computer backward and forward. And we were pair programming, but I didn't have a name for it. He was the product owner. I was the developer and a tester. He was a tester. We were kind of switching between these roles constantly as we were working, and eventually we did actually come up with this very naive but very effective piece of software that allowed him to go into that room and punch some numbers in and get some answers out. And we tested it to death because he couldn't afford for it to be wrong. And suddenly, instead of being upstairs for 2 hours doing estimates for new work, he was upstairs for about 30 to 40 minutes, and he was back downstairs again. I mean, it was a massive difference, because he was constantly having to look at the price for this, look up the price for that. And what we did is we just sat down every month, just reviewed the prices, typed them in, job done. That was in 1980-something-ish. I can't remember now. So I think, in a way, I'm biased against having a fixed job title, a fixed role, because I had that early experience. Now, of course, you know, being relatively young, I think I was probably about 12, 13 at the time. You know, the education system hadn't completely ruined me, but it managed to a little bit later by introducing me to the waterfall model when I started studying computer science. And when I first had an opportunity as a person at school to go out into the industry and say, well, let me get some experience, let me see, how does it really work in the real world? And it was explained to me that you can't work like that. That's not allowed. What you do is you have a systems analyst. Is anyone here a systems analyst? Does anyone work with a systems analyst? You do. They still exist. Wow. Not many, though. Yeah. So this was kind of back in the late 80s, early 90s. Again, I can't remember the late 80s at this time. And I went and spent a couple of days at British Gas. And they had some amazing stuff they were doing with technology at the time. But they had some very, very fixed roles. You had you had actually requirements analysts, and you had systems analysts, and systems analysts were kind of like architects, but they'd take it to a much lower level detail in the designs. And the programmers would translate that into something the computer can understand, and the testers would test it and provide the feedback, and you'd basically follow the waterfall life cycle. So I thought, oh, right, well, I want to be a systems analyst, because they kind of get to kind of operate at quite a broad level. And the person that I happened to work with said, oh, and I also do some programming from time to time just for fun. I'm like, oh, okay, this sounds like my kind of gig. I like it. A few years later, I came out of school and university and went into my first ever job. Things had changed. Suddenly, rapid application development had come along. That was the new buzzword. Who remembers rapid application development? Or RAD? Or rapid accumulation of defects? So that was my experience of it at the time. But anyway, so my first job actually was with a certain telecommunications company that's also British. And my job was junior analyst. I'm like, yes, I am on the ladder. I'm on my way to being a systems analyst. It's one step away from junior analyst. What I didn't realize is that junior analyst was just a fancy term for dog's body or, servant. I think in the movie business they call them runners. Basically someone just does whatever the manager tells them to do that they don't want to do themselves. And they gave me this beautiful job. They had this huge database of addresses, and they wanted it, they needed it cleaned up. There was loads of duplicates, there was stuff in the wrong fields. And they said, right, you've got to go and clean that up. I'm like, yeah, cool, right, give me a computer. Windows 3 dot something or other, whatever it was. And I was like, okay, well, what tools have I got available to me here? All right, this Microsoft Access thing, that's got some code stuff I can use. And I started having a go at kind of figuring out how I was going to solve this problem. And he said, well, what are you doing? Well, you want me to clean up the data? He said, why are you doing it like that? What's that code on the screen? He said, I didn't ask you to be a developer. I just want the data cleaned up. Oh, but I thought, he said, look, just do it. Can you please do it manually? I was like, okay. I'm thinking thousands and thousands and thousands of records. What am I going to do with this? Anyway, my eyes were going crossed like this. I was just going through, delete, oops, not that one. It was just, it was so boring. Anyway, so I figured this is my first job, so I've got to do what the manager says, right? Because, the manager rules, he tells you what to do, and he tells you how to do it. That's what I believed. I didn't know any better. So I thought, well, he can't tell me what I have to do and how I do it in my lunch breaks or after work or before work. So I will sit there and I will go completely and utterly insane, going through record after record, deleting and so on and so forth. But in my spare time, I'm going to automate this, because I'm not spending the next 3 or 4 weeks doing this day in, day out. This is not why I've been studying computing all these years. So I decided, did that, and a few days later, I had something that was pretty sure that worked, ran it. It took a while. But when it finished, the job was done. So I think it was about 4 days into the job. He was expecting it to take 3 or 4 weeks. So I called him over and I said, okay, I've finished. He said, you can't have done, it's impossible. I said, no, I have. Trust me, I finished. And I actually showed him, I had some counts of how many sites we had. I'd done some cross-checking of how many records of addresses we have versus the sites. It all matched up. I had some candidate things I wasn't really sure about, because it looked like they probably should exist, but it didn't give us the right numbers, and there was a bunch of other things I showed him. He said, oh, that's very thorough, but how did you do it in 4 days? I said, well, you told me to do it manually, but I decided in my spare time I'd automate it. And he said, look, if I wanted you to be a developer, then I'd have told you to be a developer. I said, but we got the job done, didn't we? So is there anything else I can do now? Because I'm really excited to do some really awesome stuff. So he said, here, read that, which was a specification for a system that I was apparently going to be working on some new project to replace it in a few weeks. So I'm not sure whether I was off better or worse off having finished the job. But the point is that I never felt like I had to be constrained to do the job the way someone else expects me to do that job, just because of a title that I have. So let's fast forward a few years later, and I ended up working at a law firm in the city. it was kind of early 2000s, 2003, 2004. It was like my second place that was using extreme programming. And I was there in the testing team. I was there because back in those days, people knew me better for a lot of work I did on a performance testing tool called OpenSTA or OpenStar. Does anyone remember that? Yeah, a few. Yeah. I was like on the forums all the time. Loved that tool. It was awesome. It was free. It was like free or £1 million. And I was like, for the other one that everyone bought. I was like, this tool is amazing. You do so much for so little. Anyway, I used to work on that a lot, and they hired me largely for my experience in that, but also because I had some experience in XP as well, and they had a new project that was starting up. So they had a development team over on one side of the building. There was this big glass atrium in between us, so at least I could see them, and I could wave, say hi. But it took a while to get there. You pretty much had to go all the way down that side of the building, all the way across and this way, because people didn't like you walking across the atrium. It ruined the experience that the lawyers had from up above, because we were in the basement, by the way. Yeah, IT and law was like IT. You meet anyone in a law firm, you say, oh yeah, I work in the IT division. Oh, you know what, I've been having some trouble with my email. Could you come and look at it? I'm sorry. But that's kind of what it was like. So I'm sitting on the other side, and I'm supposed to be then now working with this team that's using XP to build this, what they called a knowledge management system. But if you imagine it's like an in-house Google for all of the paperwork that this law firm has ever generated ever. And it was it was going to be awesome. And I was really excited to be part of this team. But I was still on the other side of the atrium. So it's really frustrating. Like, sometimes I'd be find a bug, and then I'll be like, I hate doing the whole phone thing, whatever. Okay. Hey, the team lead, his name's Antony, by the way. His name's Antony as well. I was like, hey, Ant, I found this bug. I'm not sure. It looks kind of a little bit weird. I'm not sure which way to go on this one. And when you get a second, can you come over? He's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So then he'd get up. He'd walk all the way around to see me. And then I'd show him and be like, oh, yeah. Actually, I think I know what's causing that. Let me go and have a look. And I'd get up and I'd walk around with him, so we were both, Anthony's walking around to the other side, and then he sits down. And then the next thing, we're looking at the code, and he's talking me through it. He says, oh, look, there, I think the problem's there. And suddenly I'm starting to get a little bit closer to the code. After doing all of that walking, I mean, if I had a pedometer, I'd be like the pedometer king. I would have like millions of steps. But I just couldn't take it anymore. It was too slow every time I wanted to communicate. And then they'd go off to the pub, and I'd turn around and I'd be like, they're gone. Where have they gone? They've gone to the pub. Why didn't they ask Anthony? And I thought, is it me? Am I annoying them by finding bugs? Maybe they just don't like me. Maybe it's because I'm a tester. So the next day when the guys came, I said, I saw you went to the pub last night. I was like, oh my God, we completely forgot about you, Anthony. I'm so sorry. Right, that's it. Tomorrow, we're planning to go again. We're leaving at 5. Make sure you come along. He said, we just decided on the spur of the moment. Enough was enough. There was an empty desk just on the block of desks next to the team. I packed up all my stuff in the testing team. I said to them, I'm sorry, guys, but I'm going to have to move over there. Don't worry, we're still going to hang out, but I need to work with this team, and I'm working with them more than you guys. So I moved all of my stuff over there. The project manager came out and said, what are you doing? I said, I'm moving desk. He said, why? Because I want to be closer to the team. But that one move was a huge catalyst for suddenly interacting with the team on a whole different level. I connected with them as people individually much, much better. Suddenly, one of the guys was like, hey, Ant, I finished writing these unit tests around this bit of code. I just want to run them past you, see what you think. I was like, cool. Yeah. Normally in the past, it was really hard to get that experience, but this was like a developer's coming to me and saying, I want your input, I want your advice. When people were getting introduced to the team, they stopped calling me the tester, they started calling me the test lead. Yeah, he's our go-to guy for when we want to know if our tests are good. Suddenly I became more like a coach or facilitator in that team. But I also started spending a lot more time pairing with the guys. And next thing I know, I'm committing production code. So I'm committing production code, but I'm a tester. Am I? No. Now I'm also a developer. This particular team They didn't care. They didn't care about job titles. In fact, for all they cared, we could have been called, Jedis or, something like that. They really didn't care. We just kind of got on with the job because we all wanted to build an awesome product, which, by the way, ended up going on to win a number of awards in the law industry. So that was another experience. Again, that was early on in my time, in my experience in Agile development. That was very early on. But that really, really changed my thinking a lot. And I found it really difficult as well because I was doing contract work a lot, and I was kind of looking for work in Agile teams because the word Agile was being used more by this time. And it was always, Agile tester, Agile developer, Agile architect, Agile business analysis. I'm like, well, what if you're kind of a bit of everything else? What if you're a bit of everything, but very, very knowledgeable in one particular area? What's that called? Generalizing specialist, or some people refer it to T-shaped people. People have a deep expertise in one area and a broad understanding of many other areas. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to make awesome stuff. I don't mind if the thing I need to do is testing, or writing the code, or doing performance tests, or some business analysis, or, God forbid, some design in terms of, graphic design. Hey. But whatever skills and aptitudes I bring to the team, that's what I want to be treated as an individual with a unique blend of skills that complement the blend of skills that the team happens to already have. I don't want to be some pluggable resource. Switch it on. Test machine, I'm not a machine, I'm actually a person. I'm not someone that's been programmed with a specific set of skills and is then told to operate like a machine. So then you've got to think, why are we treated like machines? We are resources. Who uses the term resources in reference to people when only talking about people? Okay. There's one particular company that I went to, and everybody in management there refers to people as resources. It kind of reminds me of like those movies about like the CIA. We're going to use our asset. They're dispensable. It kind of feels a little bit cold and uncaring. And I don't think it gets the best out of people when you call them a resource. I mean, calling, you're a resource on this team. Really? Thank you. You're disposable. I can scrunch you up. I don't think it's very nice, personally. But they got me thinking, well, why? Why do we do this? Well, because that's what most popular schools of management in terms of what's executed, not what learned people, many of whom in this room will talk to you about, but sort of this manufacturing, old school Tayloristic manufacturing mindset where people are just doing a job that anyone can do. Anyone can fold the sides of those boxes and move it along. The idea of resources, it doesn't make us better at what we do. It makes it easier for us to conform and fit into a box so that the hierarchical control structure can look down and feel like they're in control, feel like they know what's going on. So many teams, so many organizations now are moving away from hierarchical organizational structures and moving towards networks where you have these teams that are working pretty much autonomously, each one with a clear understanding of what their goal is. At Spotify, they refer to this, one of the things that they work very hard on is on the concept of alignment. So they have alignment and autonomy. And what they're looking for is high alignment and high autonomy. By alignment, what they mean is that everybody has an understanding of the focus and the direction of the company. And if everyone's working towards a common goal, we can just get out of their way and trust that they will do the right thing. So suddenly, we're not actually focusing on conforming anymore. We're now focusing on performing. We're not managing quality by making sure you conform to a process. We're managing quality with empirical data that's up to the minute, here and now, about the quality of our product, how well we're performing, are we getting better, are we getting worse? We're using an empirical approach to managing quality now. And that, to me, is the key difference, that the sort of old school style of doing things is much more about hierarchical control through conformance. A lot of QA as in proper QA, not just testing, looks at, are we producing these documents? Or governance is the other keyword. Have we produced that document? Tick, that means they're doing that part of the process, and therefore the quality is going to be good. I think quality comes from people, not process. I personally think quality comes from people interacting, being treated as individuals. Is this starting to sound familiar? Agile Manifesto, anyone? Okay. Then one day, I met a group of people, and we were all kind of into like online gaming. I used to do a lot of online gaming when I had more time. I used to like playing games like Rainbow Six, which was the Call of Duty of its time. So I'd be sitting there online, sort of playing these military games, people kind of like shooting at each other and stuff. And I met a bunch of guys who were like that as well. And they said, you know what, we found out about this thing. It's kind of like paintball, but it's called airsoft. Everyone knows about paintball. How many people have played paintball? How many people still have bruises? So airsoft is similar to it in that, but there's no paint, and the thing that you're firing is a tiny little 6mm BB made of plastic. It hurts when it hits you as well, but the equipment looks more like the real deal. In fact, police forces and some military forces actually use them for training purposes. And so I started playing this, like going down to these events that are being run and, capture the flag and all of that sort of thing. And it was kind of like, that perfect bridge between the sort of the online gaming world and paintball. And there was this thing that was kind of in the middle that was like even more awesome than that and even more awesome than that. So I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. This is fun. And it's exhausting as well. And it's more fun than going to the gym and running like this. So I ended up getting reasonably good at it and got invited to join a team. And we actually competed. We even had a sponsor, would you believe? And so then we started to go kind of like to these training events. And one of the guys that kind of ran the team, he had some connections into some people that resulted in one of my most favorite testing jobs I ever got. So you see in the movies where you have these targets that pop up, and as you're walking through the rooms, they have to like shoot the targets. You've seen that? Yeah? I got to test computerized versions of those. That had this control panel and a computer and all these graphs going on and sensors, and it would tell when you crossed a particular point, then it would pop up. It would measure your reaction times. It was fantastic. The whole system was incredible. And I got to be one of the testers on it, and they was like, yeah, come, we could help us test this system. I'm not sure how good I was at a tester because I got carried away. I was having so much fun. I don't think I was really thinking about what I was doing that much. I was just trying to get better and better and better. I want my reaction time to under 0.2 seconds. But one of the things that this particular company also did was they developed training courses they take to various police forces. And they wanted to try this new system with this training course. So they said, well, can we do it with you guys first? Let's see what we experience from it, and then we'll take that to a real police force. We're like, yeah. So we're in this like old abandoned courthouse in Bristol, like 3 floors, including all the jail cells down there. We're all dressed in all of the sort of, all black gear, head to toe. We've got our radios on. We've got our rifles on our back. We've got the whole gear, head to toe. And they said, right, we're going to teach you about dynamic entry. It's the process that's used for hostage rescue. And they took us through the process. And they said, right, what we have is you have person who does method of entry, they go on that side of the door. You have your point person, they're covering the entrance to the door. The team leader stands behind that. They're the person that call the entry. They may throw in a distraction device. I think that's like a grenade. It's very distracting. And then the person at the back is your rear cover. And he said, right, what you've got to do is team leader calls the entry, method of entry, blows the door, team leader throws in the distraction device, and bang, first 2 go in, take down the bad guys. That's how it works. It's like, okay, so we did that. So they reset us, they got us back to the beginning again. So right, everyone back in their positions, you ready? Do it again. It's like, okay, now what we're going to do, we're going to do that, and then I want you to get back into your positions, but not on this door, on the next door, and I want you to clear that room. So we're like, okay, so we did that. And then I was one of the first 2 guys in. And then we had to come all the way back out. And then the guys who were outside the door then followed us to the next door. And then we all got to the door. Bang, next one went through. We went through the next door. He's like, oh, cool. He said, now reset all your positions. He went along and moved all the targets around. And he made us do it again and again and again. And we always had to get back into exactly the same position because I was the point guy. He was the team lead. I can't be the team lead because he's the team lead. He's the most experienced one. That guy's the method of entry guy because he's the guy who knows how to blow things off the doors and stuff. So I can't change my position. After lunch, they came back and they said, we're going to teach you a different system. It's called the read system. So what you're going to do is you're going to go through each of the rooms again, but whoever is nearest to the next position adopts that role. So now, the first who have gone into the first room in here, the team outside don't have to wait for those first 2 to come back out and get set up on the next room before they fall in behind and the method of entry goes in. Whoever's outside the room, once this room's called clear, they can immediately adopt new roles and we fall in behind them. There happened to be this guy who was a former British Army trainer, and he said, there's a couple of reasons for us using this. Because one, it's a lot faster, because you're just flowing from room to room, and he said flow, and I was like, ding, flow. That's what this is about, maximizing flow. In the same way that we want to maximize flow from working on one user story to the next, these guys are working on maximizing flow from one room to the next. In their case, in the real world, that actually means lives are at stake, so it really matters. He said the second reason we do it is because the first guy in the room has got a 70% greater chance of being shot and killed than anyone else. And we like to share that risk around because it's not really fair to give that to one person. I said, fair enough. Fortunately, we were only working with bits of plastic. You know, little plastic BBs for simulation purposes. Did kind of bring the concept home to me, though. But what was key for me about that experience is that we constantly adapted roles. We actually do that in our families. We are constantly adapting role. How many parents are here, by the way? I don't want to go on about parents too much. Yeah, quite a few parents, right? So, you know, you're constantly adapting. I mean, if you're a parent, you're not just there to put food on the table. You're a chauffeur. You know, you're a counselor. You're a law enforcer. You know, you've got so many different roles as a parent, you know, constantly switching hats. And then we leave home and we go to work, and then that's it. We can only do one thing suddenly. Oh, back to the Special Forces story. One interesting thing, though, is there's still a method of entry expert in the team. And that's the guy who's got the shape charges on his back that he can quickly take off and put onto the door. He's our expert. But we only need him in that position when we have a tricky entry on a barricaded door. We don't need him if the door's unlocked and all you need to do is just kick the door open. Anyone can do that. Anyone in the team can do that. So you're going to have degrees of competency. Just like one of the experiences I had on one team once is the next task that needed to be done was actually to make some changes to the build scripts. And at the time I hadn't worked, it was with Nant, the .NET Ant. I hadn't done that before. So I thought, well, that's the most important task. The most relevant task to my job title is this other thing, but we don't need that yet. That's the least valuable thing to the team. I was able to pick up the most valuable thing, which was to work on those build files, and Google was my friend. You know, it took me a lot longer to do than the expert we had in the team, but he was working on something far more important, far more tricky to do. So I made some progress on it, and he came along and he helped me figure out how to improve it, how to make it better. It was good enough for now, but we needed to improve it. Great, I learned something. Now I can bring new value to the team again. I've just learned and gained a new skill. What I have in my mind for this is that I really don't want to be constrained in how I can add value to a team. I want the team to be open to me adding value in whatever way I possibly can, whatever skills and aptitudes I possibly have. Among the 8 lean wastes is non-utilization of talent. You know, things like defects as a form of waste gets a lot of attention. I don't think the non-utilization of talent in organizations is given enough attention. Because if you take care of that, many of the other forms of waste will take care of themselves. It's kind of buried there and kind of in the middle of the downtime acronym for the 8 forms of waste. When I'm in a team, I want my focus to be on performance in whatever way it matters to that organization, not conformance to a process that was built around some concept of how you delivered software in the 1960s. And every time I feel like I'm being put in that tiny little box, I just feel like I'm stuck kind of about here in this process that has other boxes with other people in them, with arrows drawn between them, and I feel stuck in a waterfall life cycle, even if that life cycle happens to only last 2 weeks and is labeled a sprint. I think that is severely limiting our agility in organizations, and if we can just take that away and be open to treating each other as individuals with individual talents and individual abilities, that we'll have a much better chance of focusing our shared goals and shared responsibilities on performance and not conformance. Thank you very much.
Great. Questions? Any questions?
Does anyone think that it's a bad idea to get rid of such constrained titles in teams? You think it's a bad idea? Cool. No, I don't. Okay.
So there was a similar talk on, what day is it now? Tuesday? That Christoph Nordstrom did about identity.
Yes,
so in
that's
terms
the one I was
of
mentioning.
The job titles, one thing that kind of springs to mind is how do we create associations and identities within the teams, and kind of how do you think we can do that if we don't have titles?
My favourite title is Antony. Why don't you ask me a little bit about me? Let's go have a coffee. You can get to know about what kinds of experiences I've had, what kinds of things I've done, and as we get to know each other, we'll start to understand who is best at what. I mean, I think there's too much emphasis. We're trying to shortcut things that actually, to do them well, you just have to invest a bit of time. I think we're trying to avoid having to treat people as individuals and actually just treat them as pluggable components. It's a lot easier to do resource planning, if you can just label people with these titles. If you look at companies like Facebook, for example, again, another example of an organization that more than many other companies operates as a collection of autonomous networks, each one responsible for their own area. So, for example, they don't have a mobile app team, but they do have messaging team and a news feeds team and an advertisers team, and the messaging team works across all of these different areas. So the people within that team, they get to know each other, they get to learn what each other's capabilities are, and have a problem to solve for the organization along the way. And I think when you're in that type of team, it becomes easier because that team feels like, we don't really know as much about this area as we'd like. I wonder if there's someone in the organization we can get to join our team. The other thing that they do is when they're hiring, they don't hire for a specific job opening as such. I mean, they do that to some extent, but I think Laurie Gola said, who's was their HR manager, I think she still is actually, she says what they do is they focus on hiring talent and then not for any specific job, and then figure out where their strengths are best going to serve the organization. So she calls it a strengths-based culture. But in order to know what each other's strengths are, we kind of just have to spend some time with each other. And if we can do that in a long-lived team, we've got a better chance of figuring that out, and then we don't have to rely quite as much on kind of like trying to plug resources into this object-oriented organizational structural machine.
So I don't have any questions for you. I'm here. But I really want to say thanks. It was a very inspiring talk. I think we need more people like you. I think we as a community where we are failing is on the fact that we are not able to bring senior management to these kind of conferences. Because what you said is exactly what our senior management needs to hear.
Take my card afterwards.
So I'm having exactly the same fight as you. So, but just a summary. Thank you so much for your talk. It was very, very inspiring. People like you are the ones that make these conferences a success. Thanks.
That's very kind. Thank you.
What did you call the pattern for that style of taking the role you're closest to? Did you call it the wreath pattern?
Read system. So you have to read
system.
the situation.
Oh, read it. Okay.
Yeah, so you read the situation.
Thank you.
This is why I needed slides, isn't it?
It is English. Oh.
So you're reading the situation in order to know how to react.
Okay.
Any other questions?
More questions? On the back. Okay. Today I'm fit, so no problem.
If you're interested in learning more about that, on my blog, you'll find an article about what we can learn from special forces, and there's a little animation in there you can watch that actually explains how it all works. So if you want to use that as a reference, feel free. I think it's also published in Better Software a few years back. Yeah.
Hi, so that was a great talk, but I wanted to know your stance on whether you think that testers should learn how to code, or is it specific for the situation that you're in?
First of all, the word should is a word I'm very uncomfortable with because it suggests that I know best for you and what you should do. What I believe is in your team, were you to just take away this sort of the constraint of tester and in the minds of many people then positioning you at the end of the process, and if you are accepted as peers with unique and individual capabilities, I think that you will learn the things that you have both the aptitude and the interest in learning, and you will add to the team in the best possible way based on what you enjoy doing and what you are very good at doing. I don't think it matters one way or the other to say that, should a particular person learn a particular skill. I'm much more interested in encouraging people to follow their passion, because the more passionate they are about what they do, whatever that thing is that they do, the better at it they're going to get, because they're going to invest their time, their energy, even money, by some people self-funding, coming to conferences like this. They're going to become awesome at it. But I do caution that people kind of stay too narrow. So I wouldn't say avoid learning to code. It can be very useful. It can be very fun and very interesting. And I would one thing I would encourage, I wouldn't say you should do this, but I certainly would encourage it, is to definitely broaden horizons, definitely look beyond the things that people tell you you're supposed to know as a tester. Look into other areas, try other things. I've learned so many things from getting a racing license, for example. I got a car racing license in the UK. From doing that process, I learned a bunch of things. It got me thinking about the difference between a race car and a road car. Where in a road car, a manual road car, you've got this overhead of changing the gears like this. Or if it's an automatic, it just doesn't shift the gear very quickly. But in a race car, suddenly a fraction of a second makes every difference. So now we've got these computerized gearboxes where you just do the paddles and it shifts faster than you can blink. It's a very uncomfortable experience because every time you change gear, it just goes bang like this. It's just really kind of quite uncomfortable. But it makes you quicker. And then it got me thinking about how, there are certain things you just take for granted in motor racing. And it got me thinking about continuous testing tools and how few people actually, who have IDEs open and they're making changes to code, and they have a continuous compilation in the background, but they won't use continuous testing tools in the background. I thought, well, actually, if I'm competing against people, I want to take that racing gearbox and drop it into my car because I want to be fast on the track too. In the same way, I'd want to take this, continuous testing, this racing testing gearbox and drop it into my IDE. So just by going out and having very diverse experiences, it got me thinking about stuff that I do. even the special forces training thing, I don't do that anymore. It's so much fun though.
Thank you very much.
I've got one thing I wanted to share with you. It's on the subject of specialization. I don't know if you've ever heard this before. There's a zoologist called Konrad Lorenz. He said that every man gets a narrower and narrower field of knowledge in which he must be an expert in order to compete with other people. I think that is an old notion. I think we're focusing on collaborating with people in our teams, not competing with them. He finishes to say, as a result, the specialist knows more and more about less and less, and finally knows everything about nothing.